ex-police dog keeps barking at a tree, which makes investigators suspicious. Welcome to USA Stories channel. Do not forget to subscribe and activate the bell button to receive all new updates. Now let's go to the story. This puppy, Kyle, was born with a devotion implanted in his head as an ex-police dog. Already an elderly German Shepherd as a puppy, Kyle was released of his police dog duties and was now spending his final days in the gorgeous countryside with a breathtaking view, under the tender care of a couple who fell in love with him right away. Given how busy he still is, it is clear that the dog regrets his many years of working as a police dog, especially his long-term companion with whom he had formed a close relationship. Most of his life, Kyle has been John's police officer partner, assisting the police in resolving several murder cases and locating those who have gone missing. Was there ever a chance Kyle would return to his prime? Kyle was born with a certain purpose in mind, and that purpose was already written all over him. He didn't know about it when he was born, but he eventually discovered his life's purpose. Before Kyle could join the service, he had to undergo training. He was naive and young, so it wasn't easy. Although Kyle appeared friendly when attacking and looking for explosives, it quickly became apparent that he was a clever and compliant man. He picked up new information and abilities fast. Kyle possessed the interest and intellect required for effective law enforcement service. Still, it was difficult for Kyle to be very hostile against others. When he left the life of a police dog, he would be allowed to live out his true nature as a lovely dog. When Kyle became a full-time police officer, he had unspoken anxieties and misgivings. It appeared to be a fear of the unknown, a worry of not being able to defend others, and a fear of not being powerful enough. His worries were soon dashed when he was matched with John, with whom he clicked instantly and developed a friendship that became the kind of relationship that people often discuss when discussing relationships between dogs and people. What is frequently unknown to us is the bond that develops between a human and a dog. The relationship created between the two is difficult to break. Although it is customary for police canines to collaborate with as many officers as possible, it was discovered that Kyle was at his most authentic when he was assigned to John. They made excellent companions. Therefore, it was agreed that it was best to leave them together. Typically, police families are home to police dogs. The dog needs this to feel loved, needed, and a part of the family. Kyle was assigned to the family at random. He was not taught how to give hugs and kisses, which at first surprised him, but later he learned as well. It was the ideal fit. Kyle thought he was the only one who was the family since he received excellent care. However, the couple learned one day that they would soon become parents. It was inevitable that things would change. Because of the potential for dog aggressiveness, some parents do not want their dogs to be around infants. The pair did not want to jeopardize the health of the unborn child. The couple chose to give Kyle away, even though they were deeply in love with him. They requested that the police locate the dog a new home. Naturally, John was both pleased and saddened by the news, but he ultimately decided to retain Kyle. John decided right away to take Kyle with him. John brought the dog that day to his flat. It was cozy and fit for a bachelor's lifestyle. John only had one wife and she worked. There was ample room for Kyle and John, who moved in together right away and became roommates. A police dog's whole existence is dedicated to continuous training and skill development in order to guard and apprehend offenders. Kyle was a seasoned canine and an absolute pro. John and Kyle were well respected because they always produced positive outcomes. They weren't idle while working. But solving crimes wasn't always simple for Kyle. He was tasked one day with tracking down a girl who had gone missing. 2 days prior, she had vanished. Kyle encountered genuine challenges for the first time, but he was moved to aid her parents when he witnessed their utter despair. Kyle used every ability and skill he has. He gave the baby's garments a good whiff and gestured that he was ready. Kyle and the police team started looking for the girl. After some time, Kyle hadn't stopped for a long distance. It looked as though there would be no success in the quest. The police started searching the location that Kyle had indicated since they trusted him. The parents, however, were spared any explanations. They said that the girl's aunt lived in this location. The girl was soon discovered in this residence. It seemed that the youngster had fled amid a fight between the parents. When the two encountered armed guys on an assignment, Kyle had acted quickly to push John out of the way of a bullet. Fortunately, nobody of them was hit by the gunshot, but Kyle's health started to suffer from the difficult circumstances. Kyle gave his all to his profession with the police. He was an excellent defender and a great lifeguard. Kyle retired at the age of 8. He was granted a serene old age as a reward for his good actions and diligence. John knew this would come eventually, of course, but the time went by too rapidly. They were happy together for 8 years. John will always remember how the dog saved his life and be eternally thankful to it captured a group of crooks with guns. They shared a great deal of memories. Although parting was excruciatingly difficult and depressing, John understood how crucial it was for Kyle. John planned an outside celebration for Kyle in an attempt to offer him one final amazing summer vacation. Kyle was given to a kind family whose kids had grown up and made the decision to vacate the property. The pair fell in love with the puppy right away. One could not help but love Kyle. He was intelligent, charming, and compassionate. He was lavished with attention by the Smith family, who frequently rubbed his tummy and behind his ears. But there wasn't enough room in the house for engaging activities, which Kyle truly required. Kyle was content in the Smith household, but he never forgot about John. The house was less congested once the couple's son moved out a year later. The family really started looking for new accommodation because they were no longer required to remain in the city. The Smiths would regularly go house inspectioning with their pet Kyle. They had great faith in his instincts. It was vital to them that they loved Kyle as much as they enjoyed the house. He gained their acceptance as a true family member, complete with the ability to vote and express opinions. The Smiths eventually discovered an old, roomy home outside of the city, which they truly enjoyed. Kyle produced the ultimate judgment. The vastness of the mansion appealed to him. Kyle was free to run and jump as much as he pleased. Furthermore, there are endlessly beautiful scenery views all around the house. Their home was close to the seaside, nestled in a valley of verdant hills. More than anything, Kyle adores going on runs with the Smiths. He was so happy doing this that he inspired Thomas to join him on combined runs. A minute later, an odd thing happened when Kyle was surveying the area and exploring some new routes. It seems that Kyle had grown disinterested in walking. The oddest thing was that he didn't appear to want to move as Thomas, who had before been able to barely keep up with him, strolled slowly next to him. To investigate any longer, Thomas made a last-ditch effort to ignore Kyle's behavioral changes, but the dog was becoming less and less energetic every day. Kyle ceased visiting the food. Then Thomas considered that Kyle would miss the city and that perhaps moving to the country was a mistake. Thomas's biggest concern, though, was that Kyle may be ill. Thomas took Kyle for a checkup at the veterinarian. To determine what the dog's health issues were, the veterinarian conducted a thorough investigation. But as it turned out, Kyle was in excellent health and wasn't sick at all. However, an amazing occurrence occurred one day. Kyle unexpectedly changed from a calm household dog to a functioning police canine while out for a stroll. Anger surged within him. Kyle skidded to a halt, sprang to attention, and stuck his nose in the dirt to start searching for anything. He was so focused on the task at hand that he failed to see Thomas. Kyle was now exploring new areas with each stroll. It was his obsession. Thomas was now able to see Kyle as a happy, active dog once more. He ventured into the heart of the jungle one day. The task was more difficult this time around than it had been in the past. He detected a strange odor but was unable to identify its source. The mystery remained unresolved, and every day Kyle's restlessness increased. It was something that required action. His need to locate the source of the odor was killing him. Thomas was required to bring back Kyle with his favorite snacks. Kyle was adamant about not following orders. Thomas had nowhere to turn. He got in touch with John, Kyle's former partner, as he didn't know what to do next. Given the length of time they had spent working together, it's possible that he had previously observed Kyle's behavior and knew exactly how to get him started again. When John noticed that Thomas had called, he became concerned. He believed Kyle was dying or seriously ill. Hearing what he did was a relief. He told Thomas that Kyle always acted in this way while he was doing an investigation, and if he discovered something, he would sit down next to it and would not move. When Thomas walked to the tree at the same spot in the forest. The tree appeared normal from one side to the other, but upon closer inspection, it was fractured and sank. It appeared strange, as though, in addition, they both want a speedy resolution to the crime. There was a skeleton in the tree, and its owner needed to be identified. Nobody could have predicted what John discovered when he walked to the tree and started to peel off the bark. John decided to contact his employer right away and tell him everything because he was so astonished by the discovery. John pulled his phone out of his pocket and began to call, but all of a sudden other criminologists were asking him to stop. It took only a quick look at each other to determine who the skeleton belonged to. Normally, identifying the owner of the bones takes at least a week, but not in this instance. It required a little while. In this case, the bones weren't genuine. They were plastic. It was someone's amazing trick for Halloween. It would be humorous if it didn't evoke such intense terror and anxiety. It was the creation of a skilled scarecrow. While John was relieved that it proved to be a false alarm, he was still concerned about Kyle. After so many years of flawless service, his companion now mistook a fake skeleton for actual bones. Perhaps he purposely did that to entice John to come to him. John glanced at his friend, who still leaped with joy at seeing him. John realized everything at that same instant. Naturally, that wasn't the skeleton. John had to chuckle. It was a really cunning ploy to get John to come visit. John's supposition was validated when he met Kyle's gaze. Curling up to his erstwhile partner, Kyle gave him a tender glance. Because he was such a clever dog, Kyle planned everything out. He was aware that John would contact him without a doubt if he played the inquiry. He discovered that the village was the ideal location for this performance after relocating there. John was very moved by Kyle's commitment. Together, they took a lengthy stroll, and throughout that trip, John and Kyle appeared to have been in the past. John assured Kyle he would see him regularly before he left. John hasn't violated his word since then. The children of an old, filthy, unsightly house left their ill mother behind, expecting to return to find her dead. But when they returned a year later, they discovered something very startling. Ida pondered how she had gotten herself into such straits as she examined the status of her ancient, unsightly house. The house in which she had lived the greatest years of her life was a rundown shanty. Not only was her physically weak and afflicted with several crippling conditions, but she was also isolated. All of her children had abandoned her, leaving her on her own. They had assisted her in navigating her daily routines for years, making sure she had the comfort and help that she required. But as time went on, Ida's health deteriorated, posing new difficulties and expectations that stretched the family's capacity to provide care. Her loved ones were overwhelmed and emotionally spent, trying to figure out how to meet her every need while also being emotionally exhausted. Their physical and emotional health started to suffer from the burden of their obligations, making it impossible for them to provide Ida the kind of assistance she needed at this point. Gradually, Ida's offspring and other relatives chose to put their own interests ahead of hers and chose to remain distant from her. For Ida, seeing her own flesh and blood turn their backs on her and the slow deterioration of the familial relationship was agonizing, making her feel completely alone and forsaken. Ida was overcome with despair when she finally managed to sit up on her bed and looked outside, seeing her once beautiful garden hidden behind the weeds that had taken over. It appeared as though her family no longer had trust in her capacity to prosper and only saw her home as a tool to protect their own pocketbook. Ida was upset. Despite having dedicated her entire life to caring for those children and putting herself last, she had been abandoned like if she were a burden. Her old age had crept up on her without any resistance, and she had gradually forgotten the energetic woman she had once been. However, she was not going to wait around for death to claim her. No, she would respond and prove to the world, as well as her kids, that she was more than simply an elderly woman with painful joints. She therefore found a way to channel her annoyance and used it as motivation to go over her boundaries. But would her tenacity be sufficient to get her through this difficult period in her life? Ida refused to let her overwhelming obstacles cause her to wallow in defeat or self-pity. She looked for more resources, conducting incessant investigation and communicating with specialists to identify substitute options. Ida's tenacious efforts led her to realize that, in addition to complementary new therapies and treatments, She actually didn't need the suggested regimeno longer require her family's support. Ida persevered against all the obstacles, and it paid off. She saw steady but unexpected improvements in her physical state with the help of a new physician. Her tenacity proved to be an invincible force that worked in concert with her medicine and therapies, gradually lifting the heavy load that had been bearing her down. Ida experienced periods of uncertainty and tiredness during her difficult road to regain her health. She was, however, reminded of her strength and her potential to regain it by her unwavering spirit. She became into a live example of the strength of tenacity and self-belief through pure determination. Restoring her health was just the start, though. Ida, inspired by her and with a fresh sense of purpose-renewed vigor, made the decision to start a new business. She looked at her overgrown yard and rundown house, which had been neglected for a long time because of her deteriorating health. Ida tackled the difficult work of repair, determined to restore her beloved home's elegance. She painstakingly planned every stage of the endeavor with unyielding focus and pure tenacity. Equipped with her unwavering will, she diligently labored day and night to bring her house back to its previous splendor. She expertly repaired the crumbling walls by removing the flaking paint, undoing years of disrepair. Ida painted the walls bright colors that were specifically chosen to capture her excitement and her renewed passion for life as soon as the walls recovered their vigor. The once depressing. Now, a symphony of colors filled the rooms, bringing life to every nook and cranny. Even starting this undertaking made Ida feel like she was 40 years younger. Ida put her all into revitalizing her garden, which had been neglected in addition to the walls. She refused to back down in the face of the tangle of weeds that had smothered her plants. She pulled every last weed painstakingly so that her veggies and flowers could finally enjoy the sunlight and nourishment they had been denied for so long. Ida became aware of her enduring love of gardening when her home and yard were being transformed. Dedicated to establishing a sanctuary where the natural world might flourish, she devoted several hours to carefully caring for her plants, delving into the mysteries of soil composition, as well as testing out cutting-edge technological solutions to accelerate their development and output. Ida's steadfast passion and commitment paid off day by day as her garden turned into a captivating scene brimming with life. The arid ground under her unsightly home was now a bountiful harvest of organic fruits and vegetables, demonstrating the amazing result of her unwavering labor. In addition to her garden flourishing, Ida became an inspiration to her neighborhood due to her eco-friendly methods and outstanding successes, which won praise from both friends and neighbors. Driven by her aspiration to provide for her family and share her recently discovered enthusiasm for vegetables, Ida set out to sell her excess produce crops. Her advanced age did not deter her. Ida was a selfless community volunteer who worked hard to build relationships with neighbors and friends at her little company. The community enthusiastically welcomed her persistent efforts and gorged themselves on the delicious farm-fresh vegetables she provided. By means of this satisfying exchange, Ida cultivated a profound feeling of satisfaction, transforming her little business into a treasured pillar of community gratitude for her unwavering commitment and the abundant crops she shared with love. Her neighbors eventually became frequent clients and later friends. They frequently went to see Ida since they thought she was a smart woman and wanted advice on their own gardens and lives. This elderly woman who had applied for a second lease quickly captured their attention on life and took her in as the neighborhood grandmother. Although she didn't appear to miss them much, they all knew she had grandkids and children someplace. However, they never paid her a visit. A whole year later, Ida's family finally made it back to her home, expecting to discover the elderly woman had passed away. Instead, they were astounded to see the incredible change. The rundown house, which they had expected to be falling apart along with Ida, was suddenly a brilliant representation of her victory against misfortune. Their looks mixed amazement and confusion as they got closer to the door, unable to process the bizarre spectacle in front of them. They gazed upon Ida, the perfect picture of health and pleasure, as she wandered through the colorful greenery of her blossoming garden, a monument to her unyielding perseverance and strong spirit. Her family foolishly believed they could instantly partake in Ida's sudden success when they approached her. They thought they could just walk back into her life and enjoy her money, without caring that she had suffered while they were gone. But because of the innumerable obstacles and tribulations that accompanied her trip, Ida became passionately protective of the life she had created. She would always be reminded of the loneliness and vulnerability she had experienced by the profound wounds their desertion had left. Ida stood, determined to maintain her power and independence towering, her determination unwavering. Knowing full well that she had not only survived their desertion but had flourished in spite of it, growing into a strong and confident person, she took the painful decision to turn her back on her family. Her bravery, tenacity, and independence had all returned. Ida had carved out her own route, turning her life from a hopeless state to one of fulfillment and optimism. She took a lesson from her family that would always serve as a reminder of her own resilience when she left them. Sometimes, in the face of hardship, our own inner strength may overcome all other forces. It is now your turn to handle. What were your thoughts on this remarkably motivational tale? If you had been Ida, how would you have felt left to perish? And could you ever abandon your family in such a heartless manner? Please feel free to share your views and comments in the comment box below. As usual, we would love to hear from you. Please remember to subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our videos. If you enjoyed the tale, the next video that plays on your screen will probably move you too. This man discovered something terrifying in his lawn after hearing tales about his new house. John Sims never imagined that the suburban Tucson, Arizona house he had bought would end up being one of the most memorable experiences of his life. He had just wanted to live a tranquil life. The prior owner of his new house had told him of a strange subterranean object, and it all began with a fascinating tale. According to the rumors, there was a sinister secret in John's garden that brought back terrible memories. So with no guidance at all, he started digging frantically and destroyed his property. John Sims had never expected to find out what he was going to find out. Discover what happened to this amazing backyard finding by reading this article. Turned out. Midtown Tucson, Arizona is where John Sims purchased a new house for himself. He thought he was in good hands because the former owner was a buddy of his. But before his friend turned over the keys to the residence, he had an unusual message to deliver. The property had a mystery about it, something monumental that had not yet been discovered. John had no idea that the mysterious communication from his friend would set off a series of events that would soon have people around the state talking. John received a seductive clue regarding the backyard from his pal. There was more to the house John had bought than what first seemed, he claimed. There was a rumor that something was hidden, somewhere far below the surface, but he had never really looked into it. John could do with the property as he wanted now that it was his. But even as he started organizing the house to his liking and bringing his possessions in, something inside of him began to shift. Like everyone with a secret under their skin, he was consumed by a burning urge to find out more. As soon as his buddy gave him this knowledge, John's curiosity ran wild. He was interested, even if it was probably just a fool's wish. John had asked him for a shovel almost half-jokingly right away, and although they had laughed it off, John knew he needed to get the right tools, would have to dispel the myth. He thought of something. Although it took him a little longer to get going, John was anxious to find out whether his backyard held any mysteries. He pondered what might possibly remain intact and what, if anything, he would find. There were countless options. It was simply a slight obstacle, even if it would mean ruining his backyard's neat, tidy appearance. There was only one way to find out, and he proceeded to dig in order to finally settle the score. The weather wasn't on John's side as he started to explore his property. The infamous heat wave in Arizona was reaching triple digits Fahrenheit. It was positively scorching. John carried on moving forward in the hopes of finding something while holding his shovel. Regretfully, in spite of his tireless efforts, he was unable to find anything. Nothing was the result of his efforts. Could it be that his pal had been deceiving him the entire time? He might have quit up, but this was just the beginning. John Sims tore up his property and dug 4 different holes, but he discovered nothing. It seemed very likely that by now whatever was under the grass had either fallen, been completely destroyed, or been encased in bricks. Though his first disappointment may have discouraged him from searching further, he was determined not to let this pass him by. Whatever it may be he would need to apply unconventional thinking. Suddenly, John thought of a better way to find it. I located what John thought would be a valuable resource, the local government files for his area of Tucson. He went through old files till he found the one. Apart from the documentation of his house's construction, there was an additional element. He was now aware of how to focus his search. The paperwork seems to indicate that Whitaker Pools, a corporation, constructed something there in 1961. But that was strange, even if it was documented in the files. What would make a swimming pool subterranean? The revelation he was about to receive would be genuinely astounding. John concluded that he needed to proceed with his less randomly in the backyard. After all, he now had documentation, when before he had been operating on a hunch. He recruited specialists to come over with metal detectors because he wanted to do things smartly. He was becoming serious now. After arriving with the appropriate equipment, the group searched the backyard. Initially, nothing happened, and he waited anxiously for every silent second to see whether something would startle them. The detectors then abruptly went off. The metal detectors the specialists had packed went off twice, much to John's utter joy. Using chalk, John traced an X over the two locations that had set them off on his backyard's grass. Currently, his search would become sightless again. Professionals had assisted him in narrowing down his search, and he was now certain that he wasn't pursuing an unattainable goal. With much anticipation, he dug in. His shovel quickly made contact with something. What had he discovered by chance? It was obvious that John's shovel had struck something made of metal. He hesitated, despite the discovery was exhilarating. Initially, he believed it may be a septic tank and pondered if excavating around it would be a terrible idea. Now that he had at last discovered something, he needed to operate with extreme caution and precision to avoid breaking any pipes or inadvertently damaging the object. However, he was appreciative to find it. Wasn't what he initially believed it to be. Based on the appearance, John seems to have found a hatch-like entry in his garden. He knelt to remove the dirt that around it, dug farther to make it private, and pried the lid apart. John Sims discovered the bomb shelter's entrance. He took care not to breathe in too much, for who knew where that would go? There was a good chance that mold spores might drift out of the shadowy darkness, or worse, poisonous gas vapors would be there. John opened the hatch and looked inside with great caution, surprised by what he saw. John Sims discovered something 3 feet beneath the grass in his garden, what seemed to be a string of cutting edges. But when he looked closer, he saw that it was actually a spiral staircase that led down. The natural tendency would be for most individuals to dive straight down the shaft to explore where it leads. John was really excited to have made this significant find on his own land, but he hesitated, and he had excellent cause to do so. Even if he took great caution, John knew it would be folly to go much farther. John has extensive experience as a fire department captain and has received specialized training in saving lives in confined places. He was well aware of the dangers. Absolutely nothing about the framework he had discovered was stable. Since he could envision, he held back, since he may have ended up in various disastrous situations if he had entered the shaft carelessly. Though he was not able to carry out his better strategy on his own, John invited several of his buddies to come assist. In addition to having support to carry out the excavations, he wanted to ensure that his pals served as a kind of spotter in case something untoward occurred. John knew he would be dead in a second if that big old lid fell down and crushed him, since he had saved lives before. They had a mission to do before they could discover what was within the hole. John could not wait to investigate the subterranean discovery in his backyard. However, he wanted to be able to move around the area securely and make use of it. With so much about the route under the surface still unknown, Harry and his buddies settled down to make plans. They worked together to create a plan and a strategy for moving forward. They were about to find out exactly how big of a discovery this would be, but they had no clue. The whole concrete structure around the steps leading down into the cavern needed to be repaired and reinforced as a priority. Because the steps were rusted through and may collapse, they posed a serious risk. John Sims was being kept from realizing what was ahead by all of this within. He knew he had to proceed wisely, though. Even if he was tempted to jump in and find out, all he needed to know was what was behind that. John and his pals put down many more layers of concrete with great diligence. The goal was to fasten the reinforcing bar into the hatch. Someone entering there needed to be certain that the building wouldn't collapse on top of them. To maintain stability, the work crew had to continuously pour in fresh batches of concrete. While this was going on, people's thoughts were constantly racing, wondering what was within the hatch and where it might lead. However, there was an obstacle in their way. The scorching heat of Arizona was a massive, inescapable issue impeding their development. Even worse, no one could be certain if anything within the hole would be affected by the tremendous direct heat. To keep themselves and the backyard safe, the group set up a tent. To protect everything as they descended, they erected a cardboard sonotube construction around the entryway. It seems that the time had finally come to enter after all that effort with cement, but they would require one more item. John Sims and his buddies had to build an electricity cable as part of their scheme to best beautify the mystery edifice beneath his lawn. The crew hoped to be able to adequately illuminate it and to find out whatever they would find there, utilize power tools to excavate farther. In order to funnel in fresh air, they also installed a black pipe. Finally, their labor was existence. Hello, I'm John, and I need some help restoring a vintage fallout shelter that I have uncovered in my backyard. Reads the pitch that John Sims posted on his GoFundMe page. The inside is in fair condition, but before he worked inside, he intended to restore the upper doorway with a substantial concrete pour. He also wanted the metal staircase replaced. His restoration has produced absolutely stunning effects. John Sims was not going to make a finding of this magnitude and then do nothing with it. John made the decision to transform his bomb bunker into a fantastic man cave, ham shack, and Civil War theater as soon as he lay eyes on IT Museum of Defense. John immediately began studying the Cold War era and the reasons behind the Tucson residents' construction of these shelters as soon as he discovered what was underneath. He thought that repairing the shelter would be a wonderful way to honor a momentous historical occasion. For this reason, he began collecting Cold War artifacts to show, including Geiger counters, vintage ham radios, water supply barrels, and sanitation kits. With 430 shares, the tale was able to assist John Sims in raising the necessary funds to begin the improvements. He set a target of $2,000, and to date, he has made $350, demonstrating the widespread support for his significant endeavor. Using the money he first raised, John Sims successfully finished the staircase with safer materials and reinforcements. He can now easily climb in and out without being concerned that the construction may collapse within and crush him. He also sent his benefactors a step-by-step account of his development. John Sims took a long leave of absence to repair his bomb bunker. In order to strengthen the entire staircase, he built the top step 2 to 2.5 times wider than the others and fastened it to the concrete wall. John is finding it much simpler to renovate the interior, make it livable, and eventually turn it into a man cave as a result of this approach. People choose to give to his cause after being greatly inspired by the accomplishments he achieved. Please remember to subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our videos. If you enjoyed the tale, the next video that plays on your screen will probably move you too.